Writing is one of the most important tactics in this day and age. Whether you're writing a book similar to me or writing in your own journal on pieces of paper, it doesn't matter. The language you write in is important as well, but no matter what language itself, you can write to be the best writer you can. What I believe writing does best is that it allows us to communicate our thoughts without losing our thread of it in the process. When I say that, I'm talking about ideas, thoughts, and other things in mind that we could then journal it on a journal or do the more realistic thing of writing a book, as many writers are deemed to say. Writing comes in all shapes and sizes, but when I talk about writing in this video, I want to talk about two specific kinds of writing. We have the literal writing, where you're writing in a journal, a piece of paper, or an idea, or typing it away on said piece of paper online. And both of these are important because when we consider writing, it is not an easy thing to do. Quite frankly, it's a challenging thing that many people will stray away from because of the tactics it takes to build upon a work. When we write, we are building ideas and thoughts, and these can generate into poems, sentences, paragraphs, and even a full book if we put our mind and efforts into it. But the problem is many of us struggle with writing in more ways than one. Whether we are in the education system or not, our writing determines how we think. And in this video, I want to discuss the habits that helped me most, especially in the past 3 years of my life as I've been a consistent writer all throughout. Back in my freshman year, I did not take writing as seriously as I did now. But what I did do was that I was watching a lot of YouTube. I used to watch these hour-long review videos talking about people's favorite video games, favorite albums, and favorite movies. And when I saw that, I wanted to do something similar. So what I did was I opened up a Google Doc and started typing away some of my favorite albums by a specific artist. Some of those come from the bands such as Blur, as well as The Strokes. And when I did this, I began scripting these potential video ideas that I tried copying. They were these long excerpts where I didn't show my face, but I would just type it away and then communicate it through subtitles. What I did there was create writing in a way that would allow me to communicate my ideas. There are two types of writings that I've learned from this amazing book called How to Read a Book. These also work well with the types of reading, but the two types of writing that I saw consistently, especially in chapter 7 of this book, was about the practical and the theoretical. The practical kind of writing discusses the hows and how you're going to figure something out when given a direction. Many of my videos are quote-unquote practical because they are giving a set advice and explain it in a thorough manner. Theoretical can either fall into another set of categories, scientific or philosophical. But I'm not going to talk about that nitty-gritty stuff. I'm just going to mention that theoretical is the idea of shoulds. It's talking about the history. It's talking about consistency, as well as how you're going to use it within a factual landscape. That may sound confusing, but the difference between both is important, especially if you're trying to describe what kind of writing you do. With fiction, it stands in its own category, but with the type of writing we do, such as school writing, we are talking about the theoretical kind, the facts, the information. Sometimes, however, in school we also talk about the practical kind. We write questions of hows and whys and what we should do compared to what is needed to be done. With my own writing, I have considered all these different perspectives, but one of the most notable things that I've done consistently over the past years is make sure that I hit my writing every time I need to. And the best way I did this was by going to the same location each and every day. Going back to my freshman year, I had all of these ideas, those scripts, those bands, and eventually when I wrote all of that, I began categorizing it in ranks. When I categorized it in ranks, it allowed me to come up with my ideas a bit more. I used this said ranking system of songs, artists, and albums to then transfer that into chapters. I began jotting this idea about a comedian that would go through specific days and how each of the days are kind of ranked out of order, but still in a way that can tell a full story. I found that idea ridiculous, however, and then I started coming up with more concrete ways to tell the story. From there, I jotted a full-on book. I had the outline and the skeleton right there. And then I began writing. I literally began writing. I took a pen around Christmas time and I wrote around 13 physical lined pieces of paper, all filled to the brim. I sadly cannot find that old copy anymore, but it was so interesting to me that this was the very first idea of a comedian story. And that current comedian story is the book I'm working on right now. So let me give you the timeline of how I got to that point when I started jotting that comedian idea back in 2023 to how I'm writing it now in 2026. That comedian idea, as I've explained in many of my videos, transformed into a melodramatic story about a teenager who is alone. This was very reflective of my freshman year, especially in second semester, where I got extremely sad and lost a lot of hope in the life I was living. It was a terrifying time, yes, but I learned a lot, especially in the form of writing. One of the ways I did this was by going to the same place every day. At lunch, instead of socializing like I usually do now, I instead focused on writing. I took my laptop to my history teacher's room and jotted away my thoughts on that very first book. For this book, I did not outline anything. While I had the same general structure of a 5-day, 5-chapter book, I then took that idea and just simply put it into a high school story, adding more and more characters with each chapter until I reached the climactic end. This would then become my very first book, and I would show up to this history room every single day until summer began, at which point I started doing my writing more literally. Both my journals and my laptop were on this exact desk, but compared to it being here now, it was in the corner behind this camera of my room. I had this position here because it allowed me to stay focused. If I showed up to this specific spot every single day, then I guaranteed that my writing will be consistent. And it showed. I was able to finish the book by the time October began. And while I didn't have that same history teacher or history room, I still focused on getting the writing done by showing up at a different place. At my school, there's this thing called advisory. It's this block period before school actually begins at first period, and I'm just gonna rant a bit. It kind of sucks they're getting rid of that next year because I loved it. It was great. I just wandered around the halls most of the days, socializing with my friends. Or in my sophomore year in particular, I would, instead of going to my class, go next to the library. There's this corner with lots of circle desks and circle chairs, and I would put my laptop there and not only eat my breakfast, but work on the book. Originally, I used to eat my breakfast a lot in this time, but then I got tired of the process. So what I instead did was write. I wrote the outline for my second novel, Artist v. Critic. And you could see, if you watch my older videos talking about this said book and the exact story that I built this book around. In short, I spent all of my time there, 1 hour every single day, not 1 hour, about 45 minutes every single morning to then write this book before my classes began. And this made the process so fast, to the point where I believe I finished that outline within 3 to 4 months of beginning it. While I didn't finish the book until July of last year, mainly because I was busy with so many other things in life, I was able to get my second novel done relatively fast in that process. While I didn't do the same for my third novel, what I did, however, was do excessive bursts. When I had the idea of working in the same place and time every day consistent, I did the same with my third novel by building this creative writing block, my class actually, and I wrote in that period. But what I instead did as well was that during lunch and in the mornings of advisory, I would spend so much time just typing away, writing in this literal notebook here, or all my notebooks up here, writing those ideas and then being ecstatic about the book at hand. There's a thing about motivation in writing that I will get to later that helped me get this book done faster, way more than the first 2 books that I've written. But coming into 2026, I am now officially done with my third novel by the end of 2025. And with 2026, I took my writing in a slightly different approach. I had the idea of creating this massive zombie story with these characters, interwoven plots, and connecting it to my 3 books before that, none of which connected with. But then problems began to rise when I considered how the story would be formed. And overall, I'm not the biggest fan of plot stories compared to the more character-driven stories. I love those where I can just focus on one or two characters and build it all together. It's why my favorite novel I worked on is The Winning Complex, for the fact that it's so character-driven. As such, I felt writing this book would waste so much time. And with me so focused on staying healthy, socializing with others, and this season of my life being less about writing and more just living, I didn't put as much effort into it. Hell, I didn't even have a consistent place to write each and every day. So instead, I did what I did with the comedian story and shelved the book until further notice. I actually want to work with several authors, maybe potential writers. So if you're curious about a zombie story with a punk rock band in the year 2000, then hit me up because I would love more input on that story. Nevertheless, I came back to that comedian Smile story. It was my very first idea, and I felt it would be amazing to go back and start working on the story because it's the best time to do it. I did all the habits that I gradually built in the past 3 years. 1, build a consistent time to show up for it. 2, have an outline that would best benefit me by writing it down on paper or on a separate doc. And then 3, use all this information and more to simply write. The issue with all this advice and more is that while it may be practical in the sense I'm explaining it now, it is extremely difficult in practice. The practicality of said practice is one determined by ourselves. And while you may be able to do that, I'm going to give you a full guide here to explain the best action steps you can take from the information and timeline you just heard about me. As I'm currently working on my quote-unquote 4th novel, it is an interesting point in my life where I'm not a perfect writer, but I've done enough to the point where I know what I'm doing. I've written several thousand-long scripts, as well as 3 books, each over 50,000 words. So my knowledge of writing comes and goes in so many different ways. But the first thing, as I brought up in all those previous examples, is to set up a same location spot in every piece of writing you can. Always make sure that your writing will be in the same spot, because if you change it up even a bit, then the habit itself will feel different. You will fall behind in ways that I feel many of us will struggle with. After a while, it may seem fun, but the motivation slowly dies down. And for that reason, I suggest the second tip: consider the title. This is going to sound like the weirdest piece of advice, but if you trust me, I guarantee it will help you. The title of a book is so critical, especially when you're explaining what the book is, that you become weirdly motivated if you consider a title. Some of the greatest classics of all time, Moby Dick, from Grapes of Wrath, to even more modern classics such as The Book Thief, all have these intrinsic and valuable pieces of information just in the title alone. As writers, you have this motivation to gather as much information as possible. When you read these classics or read nonfiction books in both practical and theoretical kinds, your ability to write becomes all the stronger. And when you consider a title first and foremost, your willingness to write becomes stronger as well. You title your journals, you title your books, help title your documents, and those stories become valuable in the fact that you yourselves are building a personal connection. I started writing my very first novel with the title of That Comedian, but then I changed it around to A Little Boy Smiles because it was about a melodramatic boy, to A Small World Smiles because it's so vague and purposeful. Your title is going to guarantee the way readers will take in your story. As such, you should consider how it's going to evolve with you. Consider the title, it's not final, but use its motivation. The act of looking at what you wrote, even if it's years old, and say, yes, that's what the story should be about. And use that to the best of your ability. I'm going to go on and on about even more ways, but the third biggest thing I want you to consider, especially as writers and building the habits even well is your mental energy. While the title can give you motivation as well as setting up the same place every day, the motivation and energy you have for said book goes hand in hand with the life you are living. If you are more motivated towards this book, then I guarantee you will finish it. Despite the fact that my third novel, The Winning Complex, is the longest book I've written, over 80,000 words and 250 pages, it was the one I finished the fastest. Why? Was it because I had a plan going into it? Was it because I drew out all the characters, knew exactly how the beginning and ends were? Yes, all of those are important, but for me, my biggest factor was the fact that I loved every second of writing that book. It was so fun. I had so many fond memories. Hell, I remember showing a couple of my friends the drawings I had, and some of them really loved the way I drew them. Others, not so much, but the way I considered how these characters would look, especially in such a confined location as a house. Yeah, the book takes place in a house for basically 80% of it. It's so strange to me, but it was such a fun experience writing the book. And that's the best thing you should consider, especially as writers. Whether you're telling a story through a poem, a book like myself, or doing more nonfiction, practical, or theoretical pieces, your story should be able to hit you emotionally in a way that you, the author, have the ability to challenge what readers are thinking, challenge your own thinking, as a matter of fact, and use the energy you build in everyday life to be a stronger and better writer. It's amazing then that we can have this power at the tip of our fingertips, yet many of us don't choose this. Why? Because it's challenging. It is often mitigating, especially when we consider things such as external factors like pay or the time we put into it, or the lack of community, especially in the writing field. It may depend on you, but if you work like a lonely teenager or work like a hardworking immigrant, while that may sound weird, you have to put your best effort in, and that comes from the energy you have in here. I may consider trying to change my advice every once in a while, but I want to be consistent, especially as writers. When we are writing, the thing that we should consider most is consistency. I've always wanted to continue going up and up and up. And while some books I have now may not be as good as ones I've written before, or even scripts I have now not as good as the past ones, I should consider how I'm going to use my writing the best I can. Simplify a few words, build the sentence structure a bit better. Hell, even read in my free time. Reading itself has been a fantastic element to writing. They go hand in hand. I remember recording a video a few months back talking about how I haven't really read, especially as an author. And while that helped for a small bit, because I was mostly trying my best to write as much, I started losing focus of why I was writing in the first place because I wasn't learning anything new. The biggest thing I want you to take away from this video is the learning aspect of writing and how the habits I've built in the past 3 years are exactly why I continue writing now, making it simple at the same time, same place, yet use the same amount of energy I put in from yesterday into today. It makes things easy, rather simple compared to what I'm doing now. And the learning aspect of both taking in new information. All these books here have been fantastic in helping me learn new things, as well as looking back at the pieces that I've read and what I'm going to continue writing will allow me to be better, especially for a fictional writer like myself. I want to dive more into nonfiction because I believe nonfiction itself has been a great way to communicate those ideas and more into what I'm writing. And when we write, the biggest thing I want you to consider is a problem. When we write itself, our mind questions so many things of what we're going to write about and what the premise should be. But my piece of advice and action step for you is if you have a journal like this one here, you should be willing to consider how you're going to tackle on a question. Question such as how will reality TV shows and game shows affect us? That was the biggest driving force that made me want to write my third novel. As I was scrolling on the internet one day and saw another Mr. Beast video pop up, and recently him talking about publishing that damn book about a reality TV show, I couldn't help but feel jealous. It was this hateful, envious feeling that when you read about reality TV shows, it's just mindless slop and entertainment. So I then beg the question, how can I make a reality TV show have effective morals, teach you to live a more purposeful life, and how entertainment itself isn't bad, but it's the people who are running it. And then that allowed me to create the winning complex because these characters, these ideas were built on the things that I've talked about in previous videos. How a villain works, why characters are more important than the story, and how books themselves are a driving force to why I'm still writing to this day. If I didn't have the books in front of me, to my left, right, everywhere in this room, then I wouldn't be writing as much as I do now. And writing The Winning Complex was my favorite experience as an author, which is the reason why it's the most exciting one I'm willing to publish. And if you watched all the way to this point, I'm excited and hoping that one day you will read this fantastic piece of art that I've made for you. As a whole, writing itself is a piece of art that you have to learn and teach yourself new ideas with. I may be not the best in this field. I'm continuing to learn in more ways than one. Use my knowledge of my favorite pieces of media, even outside of books, such as movies, TV shows, sometimes video games, but I'm primarily focused on ways to improve as writers. You assume that if you be a writer, you have to write every single day. And that is true. I believe you have to write every single day to be the best writer you can. But your output shouldn't be as demanding as your input. Your output itself, what you put in each and every day and the result you get, should be reflective of the quality you put in, the life you are living, the writing you consume, and the writing you yourself put out there. So if you have a story that you want to tell in a full-on book form, then I guarantee you should do it. But always start small. I did not start writing books until my freshman year because before that I was writing scripts. I was learning about ways to communicate in first-person point of view and then started jotting more and more ideas until I finally got to my very first book. We all have different ways to communicate that first book, and reading classics such as 1984, Moby Dick, or even something like No Longer Human, these stories range in size, quantity, and most of all genres, but they all are books because we have the time to consume it. Instead of wasting our lives staring at a screen or spending so much time rotting in bed, we should be able to create something. And my ideal that you should create art is the most important thing you should take away from this video. The art you should create varies from person to person. Even the form of sports can be considered an art. But for me, I believe that writing is the best one. It goes hand in hand with reading. And reading itself is important to teach you something new, especially if you're out of the education system. But writing, my friends, is exactly why I'm continuing this path as much. It's exactly why I create as many videos as I do. And it's why I'm going to write as many books in my lifetime as I can and never quit. Despite the fact that you will see me one day create so many different mediums among the world we live in, I'm going to use the habits that I built now. Good sleep, good mental exhaustion, good location spot even. If you aren't sitting near the sun, what are you doing? Use all of that and more to build yourself as a writer. You have the ability to tell a fantastic story, and even if you've told one or two stories already, you shouldn't give up in what you created. You started your journey now, but with my motivation, your hope, and your ability to learn from a practical and theoretical sense, I'm telling you, you will become the best writer you can moving forward. Thank you for watching today's video. Use this information wisely to continue inspiring others. Man, all I had to do to tell better videos was shave my mustache and goatee, and now this was legit probably my favorite video I recorded all month. I can't tell you exactly why, but I really love writing, especially earlier this morning that I started writing my book around like 4 a.m. and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'm around chapter 7 of the book, around 20,000 words in. So if you want help to get to that level now, even if it's something as small as a few pages or two, it's fine to communicate with me, as I have an Instagram down the top link of the description that you can check out to DM me personally. Along with that, check out my 3 books down the top link of the description as well. They're not published. They will be updated in the future, but they are the best quality I have currently. And if you want to know more about me, then check out those perspectives when I was a teenager. Until next time, I am Arnel Arcega, and keep on reading, keep on writing, and take care.